Michael, Linda, Emily, and Jacob Parker were an ordinary family living an ordinary life until one night shattered their world forever. What dark secret turned peaceful Millfield into a crime scene? And how did one violent man evade capture in a tense Tennessee manhunt? Michael, Linda, Emily, and Jacob Parker were an ordinary family living an ordinary life until one night shattered their world forever. What dark secret turned peaceful Millfield into a crime scene? And how did one violent man evade capture in a tense Tennessee manhunt? The small town of Millfield, Tennessee was the kind of place where everyone knew their neighbors and life moved at a slow, comfortable pace. It was the kind of town where children played outside until dusk and families gathered for barbecues on weekends. Crime was almost unheard of, and the residents took pride in their close-knit community. But on a cold October evening, that peace was shattered forever. The Parker family lived in a neat two-story house on the edge of town. Michael and Linda Parker were well-liked by those who knew them, and their two children, Emily and Jacob, attended the local school where they were both bright and cheerful students. Nothing about the Parkers suggested trouble. They kept to themselves mostly, but always greeted neighbors with a smile. That night, the house was dark and silent, with no indication that something terrible had just occurred inside. When a concerned neighbor called the police after noticing the family's mailbox hadn't been touched for days, officers arrived to find the front door slightly ajar. What they discovered inside sent a wave of shock through the entire community. The Parkers had been murdered, 4 lives taken in a way that was brutal and unfathomable. The scene was grim. The family was found in different parts of the house, each victim showing signs of a violent struggle. Yet, oddly, there was no sign of forced entry, no stolen items, and the home appeared undisturbed aside from the horrific violence. This contradiction puzzled the detectives. How could a family be killed so savagely without any obvious break-in or theft? The investigation began immediately. Police sealed off the house and started collecting evidence. Specialists combed through the rooms, searching for any trace left by the killer. The coroner's report would later reveal that the murders happened late at night, probably around midnight, but the precise timeline remained uncertain. The entire town was left with an eerie feeling, a darkness that had suddenly invaded their peaceful lives. Neighbors described the Parkers as quiet and private, people who rarely invited outsiders into their world. There had been no arguments, no recent disputes, nothing to suggest that anyone held a grudge against them. The police interviewed friends, co-workers, and acquaintances, hoping to find a motive or a suspect. But everyone seemed just as stunned as the authorities, struggling to make sense of the horrifying crime. Rumors began to spread. Some whispered about a stranger in town, others speculated about a possible robbery gone wrong, though nothing was missing. The community felt vulnerable, realizing that something this violent could happen right in their backyard. The local sheriff's department worked tirelessly, holding press briefings and reassuring residents that they would find whoever was responsible. As days passed, the media arrived, and the story gained national attention. What was once a sleepy town became the focus of a tragic mystery. People everywhere wondered, who could commit such a crime, and why? The answers seemed just out of reach, hidden in the shadows of that quiet Tennessee neighborhood. Amid the fear and confusion, one thing was clear. The murder of the Parker family was just the beginning of a dark and twisted story that would soon unravel in unexpected ways. The town held its breath, waiting for the next clue that would finally bring the violent criminal to justice. The investigation into the Parker family murders quickly revealed a number of strange and unsettling details. At first, the police had no solid leads, but as the days wore on, pieces of the puzzle began to emerge from the darkness. The crime scene was meticulously searched again and again, and it was during one of these sweeps that detectives discovered a rare type of shoe print just outside the back door of the Parker home. This print was unlike any commonly found in the area, a distinct pattern from a high-end, limited-edition boot that had only been sold in a few specialty stores across Tennessee. The discovery of the shoe print sent investigators down a new path. They began contacting local stores to track down customers who had recently purchased the unique boots. Meanwhile, they examined surveillance footage from nearby homes and businesses in the neighborhood. One camera, positioned near a street corner a few blocks away, captured a shadowy figure moving quickly and cautiously through the streets during the early hours of the morning on the night of the murders. The image was grainy and unclear, but the figure's deliberate pace and stealth suggested someone familiar with the area and intent on avoiding detection. As the search for the suspect continued, another unsettling detail came to light. Police uncovered a series of handwritten letters addressed to the Parker family. These letters contained cryptic warnings and veiled threats, written in shaky, uneven handwriting. The messages spoke of payback and justice, but they didn't provide any clear explanation or context. The family had apparently received these letters in the weeks leading up to the murders, but they had never reported them to the police. Neighbors said they had never seen anyone suspicious lurking around the house or heard any arguments coming from the family. Detectives dug deeper into the Parker family's recent history. They found no record of any enemies, disputes, or ongoing conflicts. Michael Parker worked at a local manufacturing plant, and Linda was a part-time librarian. Both were described by colleagues as hard-working and well-liked. The children, Emily and Jacob, were involved in school activities and had good friendships. Nothing about their lives seemed to point toward a reason someone would want to harm them so violently. Despite the lack of a clear motive, investigators focused on the threatening letters as a possible connection to the killer. The handwriting was analyzed by experts, but the author's identity remained a mystery. The letters suggested a personal grudge or a desire for revenge, but no one could say who might harbor such feelings against the Parkers. As the community waited anxiously for answers, the police continued to follow every lead. They questioned friends, co-workers, and even distant relatives, hoping to uncover someone who might have known about the threats or the unusual boots. The town was gripped by fear, unsure if the murderer was still nearby or if they had already vanished into the shadows. Then, a new tip arrived from a local informant. Someone claimed to have seen a man matching the description of the shadowy figure wearing the rare boots at a gas station on the outskirts of town shortly after the murders. This sighting gave police their first solid lead and set in motion a series of events that would soon lead to a shocking discovery. The manhunt for the person responsible for the Parker family murders was intensifying, and the hunt was far from over. For weeks, the investigation seemed to stall despite the promising lead of the rare boots and the gas station sighting. Police tirelessly followed up on every tip and searched for any connection to the mysterious man seen near Millfield after the murders. Then, a breakthrough came when forensic experts identified a small piece of fabric caught on a nail near the back door of the Parker house. The fabric matched the material used in a rare, high-end jacket, the same brand as the boots, sold exclusively in a handful of stores across Tennessee. The discovery of the fabric renewed hope in the case. Police checked purchase records from the limited stores selling the jacket and found a match. A man named Richard Hayes had bought the jacket just weeks before the murders. Hayes had a long criminal record filled with violent offenses and was known to move frequently between towns, rarely staying in one place for long. His transient lifestyle and history of violent behavior made him a prime suspect. The officers immediately issued an arrest warrant for Hayes, but when they went to his last known address, a rundown apartment on the edge of a nearby town, they found it empty. There were no signs of where he had gone, and neighbors reported seeing him leave suddenly without explanation. It was clear Hayes was on the run, and law enforcement faced the daunting task of tracking him down across the state. As the search intensified, investigators uncovered troubling details about Hayes's past. He had recently been released from prison after serving time for assault and was suspected in several unsolved crimes. His pattern of violence suggested he was dangerous and unpredictable. The urgency to catch him grew, knowing that a man capable of killing an entire family could strike again. Authorities mobilized a statewide manhunt. Police departments across Tennessee coordinated efforts, sharing information and setting up checkpoints on highways and rural roads. The media quickly picked up the story, and the public became deeply invested in the hunt for Hayes. Social media exploded with sightings, rumors, and theories, though many proved false. The constant flow of misinformation complicated the search, but also kept pressure on law enforcement to act quickly. Despite the extensive efforts, Hayes managed to evade capture for weeks. His knowledge of the local terrain, combined with his experience living on the run, made him a difficult target. He moved silently through forests, abandoned buildings, and small towns, always staying one step ahead of the police. The police used helicopters, K-9 units, and surveillance drones to track him, but Hayes's movements remained elusive. His trail went cold more than once, frustrating the officers and leaving the community on edge. People were scared to go out at night, fearing the violent fugitive was somewhere nearby. Finally, a tip from a concerned citizen led officers to a remote cabin miles away from the expected search area. The cabin was isolated, surrounded by thick woods, and appeared abandoned at first glance. But inside they found Richard Hayes. He was tired and cornered, but showed no signs of surrender at first. After a tense standoff, Hayes was arrested without further violence. His capture brought a wave of relief to the town and law enforcement alike. The manhunt that had gripped Tennessee for so long was finally over. But even as Hayes was taken into custody, many questions remained unanswered about the true motive behind the Parker family murders and the twisted path that led to such brutality. The arrest of Richard Hayes marked a turning point in the investigation, but it was far from the end of the story. As soon as Hayes was taken into custody, law enforcement began intense questioning, hoping to uncover the motive behind the shocking Quadruple murder. Despite hours of interrogation, Hayes remained mostly silent, offering little information about why he targeted the Parker family or how he had planned the attack. His refusal to cooperate only deepened the mystery and fueled public speculation. Authorities soon learned that Hayes's past was filled with violent behavior and unresolved anger, but no obvious connection to the Parkers. Investigators combed through his history, searching for any clue that might explain why he chose this particular family. They discovered that Hayes had lived in several towns across Tennessee, often drifting from place to place without forming lasting relationships. There was no record of him having met the Parkers or having any direct grievance against them. However, a surprising detail emerged during a search of Hayes's belongings. Police found a small collection of letters and photographs that seemed to be connected to the Parkers. Among them was a torn piece of paper with part of the threatening message that had been sent to the family before the murders. This discovery suggested that Hayes had planned the attack well in advance, possibly harboring a personal vendetta. But without knowing the full context, the meaning behind the letters remained unclear. The trial that followed revealed even more about Hayes's troubled past. Testimonies painted a picture of a man haunted by years of violence and bitterness. Friends and former associates described him as volatile and dangerous, with a history of lashing out when angered. Yet no one could fully explain what had driven him to commit such a heinous crime against an innocent family. Throughout the proceedings, the prosecution argued that Hayes acted with cold calculation, choosing the Parker family as a target to satisfy some dark need for revenge or control. The defense, meanwhile, tried to highlight Hayes's troubled background and mental health issues, suggesting he was not fully responsible for his actions. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. The rare boots, the jacket fabric, the threatening letters, and his sudden disappearance all pointed directly to him. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury found Richard Hayes guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought a sense of closure to the Parker family's grieving community, but it did not erase the pain or the questions that still lingered. In the months that followed, the town of Millfield struggled to return to normal. The violent crime had left a permanent scar, shaking the once peaceful streets and casting a shadow over the lives of everyone who lived there. People remained cautious, aware that darkness could sometimes creep into the most unsuspecting places. The Parker family's story served as a grim reminder of the unpredictable nature of violence and the fragility of safety. Though justice had been served, the true reasons behind the murders remained a haunting mystery. The threatening letters, the calculated attack, and the cold silence from the killer left many wondering what might have been if the pieces had come together sooner. Despite these unanswered questions, the town moved forward, determined to heal and remember the victims. Memorials were held, and support groups formed to help those affected by the tragedy. The memory of the Parkers lived on, a solemn reminder of a nightmare that forever changed a quiet Tennessee community. Even after Richard Hayes was sentenced to life in prison, the ripple effects of the Parker family murders continued to be felt throughout Millfield and beyond. The community that had once thrived on trust and familiarity now carried a lingering sense of unease. People struggled to understand how such a brutal act could occur without warning, and many wondered if they had missed signs or clues that might have prevented the tragedy. The unanswered questions hung heavy in the air. In the months following the trial, investigators continued to dig deeper into Hayes's background, hoping to uncover more about his motives and connections. They interviewed old acquaintances, reviewed phone records, and searched for any evidence of prior communication between Hayes and the Parkers. What emerged was a portrait of a man deeply troubled by his past, but isolated and disconnected from those around him. Hayes had no known ties to the family, and no clear reason to single them out, except perhaps a twisted fixation born from unresolved anger or mental illness. The threatening letters remained one of the most perplexing elements of the case. Despite extensive handwriting analysis and forensic testing, authorities never identified the original author beyond Hayes himself. Experts speculated that Hayes might have written the letters himself to create a false trail or to psychically torment the family before the attack. The letters suggested premeditation but offered no clear explanation for why the Parkers were targeted specifically. The town held several memorial services to honor the victims, and the Parker family's friends and neighbors came together to support each other. A scholarship fund was established in the children's names, aiming to keep their memories alive through education. The community also worked to strengthen neighborhood watch programs and improve communication between residents and law enforcement, determined to prevent anything like this from happening again. Psychologists and crime experts weighed in on the case, discussing how violent offenders like Hayes often operate on deep-seated grievances or distorted perceptions of reality. Some believed that Hayes' transient lifestyle and history of violence were signs of someone spiraling out of control long before the murders, but without intervention, his anger found a tragic outlet. Others pointed to the importance of early mental health support and community vigilance in preventing similar crimes. Though Hayes was behind bars, the impact of his actions left scars that would not easily heal. Families in Millfield and nearby towns became more cautious, and a shadow of fear lingered, especially at night. The community's sense of innocence was forever altered, replaced by a hardened awareness of how quickly safety could be shattered. Yet, amid the sorrow and fear, there was also resilience. The people of Millfield refused to let the violence define them. They rebuilt their sense of community with greater care, reaching out to neighbors and supporting one another. Over time, the town slowly began to heal, carrying the memory of the Parkers with them as a reminder to cherish every moment and protect their shared peace. The Parker family murders remain a chilling chapter in Tennessee's history, a story of tragedy, mystery, and the pursuit of justice. While some questions may never be fully answered, the case stands as a stark warning about the hidden dangers that can exist even in the quietest places and the strength of a community to endure in the face of darkness.